operate in truth, right? Operate in truth. Tell the truth.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Gator Truth Florida Football Podcast. I'm Daniel, and on this episode, we're going to take a look at the Miami Hurricanes taking a trip to Gainesville against our Florida Gators. And I'll be honest, this is one of the most exciting openers that we've had at home for quite a while. I mean, Utah was exciting 2 years ago with a Pac-12 champ coming in and it being Coach Napier's first year, but there's just something about starting week one against a rival and doing so at home. So definitely something I'm looking forward to. It's going to be a great atmosphere. Wear whatever color you want. But if you're wondering, the school did ask fans to wear white to the game. And that's all I'm going to say about that. I know there's a debate about it. I'm not entering that fray, at least not anymore. But anyways, let's go ahead and get to it. Let's take a look at Miami a little bit. This will be one of our shorter previews. I will be honest, trying to get to some of the fun first night of college football. But anyways, Miami comes in, brand new QB, one of, I believe, 7 new QBs at their schools that Florida will face this year. They have Cam Ward, who came over from Washington State, a guy who has many highs, many lows. He's thrown for all sorts of yards. Granted, he's had almost 500 pass attempts most seasons. And in his career, Cam Ward has 30 interceptions, but I do have to give him credit. Last year at Washington State, he did have 25 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. So 30 is a lot for a career, but when you're looking at there's 23 in his first 3 seasons starting, 7 is not bad. And a 25 and 7 touchdown interception ratio is not the worst thing. There is, of course, the fact that he was playing Pac-12 defenses and not necessarily SEC defenses, but there are teams he did face, like a Washington team that did have pretty good defenses. And heck, we've got one of those safeties that he faced coming in and starting for the Gators in Asa Turner. Another interesting fact with Cam Ward is that he has 46 fumbles on his career. Now, that's not 46 turnovers, 46 fumbles lost. He has recovered, or someone on the team has recovered a good number of them. But the fact is, he does fumble if you can get to him, and that's hopefully something that the Gators can take advantage of, which we'll talk about more when we talk about our defensive keys. Another star player for the Hurricanes is wide receiver. His last name is Restrepo, had almost 1,100 yards last year. I think it was 1085 to 95, somewhere like that. Any receiver that gets 1,000 yards, you do need to respect it. And they're also returning another receiver who was close to 1,000 yards. So this is a talented team. I know they played in the ACC last year. Miami, 7-6, including a bowl game. Not much better than us. I mean, argument could be made, had they faced our schedule last year, they may have been 5-7 as well. But we'll again get to that. But I do want to say, despite that, there is talent on this Miami team. They also have another transfer coming in on their offense, starting running back Damian Martinez, transferring from Oregon, where last year he had 1185, so almost 1,200 yards rushing for the Beavers, and that includes a very not so great game against Oregon in the Civil War to cap off this season. And we all know, I mean, heck, we saw it last week in Dublin. His quarterback was DJU, who is now at Florida State, and DJU is a very limited passer. And so if you have Damian Martinez, who's a pretty good running back from what we've seen, didn't play against us too much in the bowl 2 years ago, but did have a decent campaign as a secondary back for the Beavers in 2022. But if you don't have that great of a quarterback, sometimes that does and actually does hurt your running backs because less of a passing threat means they can stack the box more. So 1,200 yards with DJU as the quarterback is something of note. And coming over from Oregon State, coming to Miami, the thing we can hope for, and again, we'll get into this with the keys, but the thing we can hope for is he's not quite acclimated to that playbook. He's not quite acclimated to his teammates, and maybe in a place like Florida, there will be miscommunication. On the defense, Bain, who was a true freshman last year, had a great year. This is a guy who has a true freshman for all the true freshmen we played on our defensive line. This guy in the ACC put up 7.5 sacks. 2 of those 7.5 were against Clemson. So he did this not just feeding off of bottom feeders, but also did well against some of the best in the ACC, and definitely will be something to look out for our offensive line, especially our tackles against them at defensive end. Miami defense comes in last year, 24th in the nation. They were 55th in passing defense and 11th against the run. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out in Gainesville. But again, this is one of our quicker preview episodes. Things that I do think are keys for the offense. I do believe that the first key is to give Merz time. I talked about Bain. There's plenty of other defenders that return. Can't pronounce his last name. He's got a brother who's on the offensive line. It's like Maluga. And again, I probably butchered that. I'm sure someone's going to be in the comments. This is how you pronounce it. But either way, linebacker was all ACC last year. Multiple year starter. I mean, they've got plenty of guys who return on a pretty good Miami defense from last year. And again, there is some leaning towards competition in that, but you got to give Merz time. If we're going to have any hope on offense, we're going to have to be able to pass the ball, because Miami's front seven is the strength of their defense. So you've got to attack their weakness, which is that secondary. And again, 55th in passing last year. We want to try and take advantage of that and get the ball, where we can, and soften up that interior of the space to create space for our running backs to get room. Offensive key number 2 is get the ball to Trey Wilson in space early and often. And the reason we want to get Trey Wilson the ball in space is because he's quite speedy. He's quite shifty. And when we did that last year, look at the first drive against Georgia, he makes things happen. I mean, first drive against Tennessee, he got the ball plenty, makes things happen. The thing is, sometimes we get on the ball. I mean, like last year, first drive against FSU, touches the ball 3 times. The problem is sometimes we don't get on the ball too much after that first scripted drive. And that's where Russ Callaway has come out. He said he's a guy we're going to try and get the ball to more. We're going to, have get it to plays for Trey Wilson, because again, going back to that FSU game, he touches it 3 times on the opening drive, only touches the ball twice for the rest of the game. And that can't happen if the Gators want success, not only against Miami, but in 2024 as a whole. So that's why I say get on the ball in space early and often, because if he's in space, he's going to make players miss. He's going to break tackles, and he's going to, what we talked about, help open up that space for the running game. Granted, we've got plenty of other talent at wide receiver, but guess what happens if you get Trey Wilson the ball early and often? Well, they're going to have to double team. They're going to have to find ways to deny him the ball, and that's going to open up more opportunities for the other guys on the field, for an Elijah Badger, for a Kamir DK, for an Aiden Wilson or Khalil Jackson or Aiden Mazel. Sorry. Keep saying Wilson, and it caught me there. But either way, it's going to open up opportunities if they've got a double team, if they've got to, throw out some zone, if they don't run too much zone, all sorts of things. And the third key I have for this offense is to get vertical. Last year, a lot of our plays were horizontal. They were the jet passes behind the line, lots of that. The problem is if you're not doing that with depth, it is not doing too much to soften that middle. And other teams took advantage of that. I've talked about how last year when we were in 11 personnel, which is 3 wide receivers, our air yards were less than 4 yards per completion. And sorry, when you've got that low of an average, defenses know, hey, we're not getting beat if you play action. We know if we cheat against the run and blitz, there's a high percentage chance that even if they do pass, we're still going to be in the way. So we've got to get vertical. I'm not saying we have to throw all of our plays, throw bombs. I'm saying vertical could be 10, 15 yards down the field. Lots of intermediate routes. Get us that quick passing game I've been on about for years. I think Russ Callaway can bring to this team because you get those 0-1 step drops, just a, 1 yard and slant or 1-2 steps and slant like that. That's going to get Wilson the ball in space. And then you're not going to have to worry as much about Merz having time, which is key number one. But if you can get him time, we can get those intermediate routes and kind of soften that D. We can maybe take a shot or two deep. And whether they're complete or not, now that's something the defense has to account for. But again, that all starts with getting Merz time. Because if you're not getting Merz time, you're not going to have time for even the pop passes because the D will shut it down the backfield. You're not going to be able to run the ball because that means you're not blocking well. So again, for our offense, the 3 keys are to give Merz time, get Wilson the ball early and often in space, and then number 3 is get vertical. Notice I didn't talk much about the running game. I do want a running game to get well or do well. Montrell Johnson is available for the game. Available, I don't know exactly what that means. It could mean he's ready 100% to go. It may mean he's trying to play no matter what. And he could be 75% and not quite the Montrell Johnson we need. And that could be just fine. That could not be. We will see. This is a tough Miami front. Definitely, I think it's going to start by, testing that front 7 and making that front 7 work in the passing game. But we'll see how that works out. For the Gators defense, the 3 keys I have, the first one is to stop the Miami running game. I talked earlier, Damian Martinez coming in almost 1,200 yards on the ground last year with a QB like DJU. We can talk about it being, in the Pac-12. But again, there are some decent defenses in the Pac-12 that he did face, like Oregon in the Civil War. And also he did face Washington. So things that you're going to see and you're going to want to see them do well is stop that running game. They also have Mark Fletcher had some time last year, and they've got an offensive line that returns a lot of guys, including last year, all ACC freshman. I'm not going to butcher that name again. He's a guy that we wanted here at Florida, ended up at Miami, and they return quite a bit. They do have some transfers on that line. And so we're going to see what that is about. But if we can stop the run game, and I've talked to people, not just, talking to friends that are UF fans, but talking to a buddy of mine that does a podcast for FSU. He and I both said stopping that run game is the number one priority. In fact, you can find that if you search 4th and Florida on YouTube, you can find the conversation about that. But if you stop them, now you've got a chance to let Ward show whether his passing game was competition or whether it was, not great. And he's more of the Ward that threw 30 INTs. You're going to see, if you can stop that running game, you're going to give your D line, which I think is the strength of this defense, with guys like Des Watson and TJ Searcy and Joey Slackman and all over the place, Boone, Sapp, Big Des, lots of people. If you stop that run game, now they can pin their ears back and try and make it like 2019 in the Citrus Bowl, except for now you're in the swamp, you have the crowd behind you, and if you can harass Ward, you can cause turnovers, whether those are INTs or he fumbles. Again, 46 times in his career he's fumbled. If you can harass him, you have that chance to create turnovers. And if you can get those turnovers, Florida's going to have a very good shot at winning. And then the third key, and maybe this is the first key, but it's the third one I've listed, is solid tackling. Many times in the past, and I'd like to go back to 2 examples of solid tackling that we failed at, and it cost Florida games. The first one I talk about, 2022 FSU. You have Jordan Travis in the backfield, not once but twice on big downs, including at least one third down that I remember, where if you just wrap them up, tons of guys around them, you wrap them up, they kick a field goal, may make it, may miss, but that's a 4-point difference. And that was a close game. Much less, if they miss it, then 7-point difference. Instead, we don't tackle him. He breaks free, runs, gets tackled inside the 1. FSU scores a touchdown. And that happened twice in that game. And that's a big difference in that game. Last year, Arkansas game, have KJ Jefferson in the backfield. Princely gets to Jefferson, hits him, doesn't solid tackle. Jefferson runs for a first down, and this is on their last drive of the game. He gets that tackle. It is game over. So solid tackling, definitely a key for this game and for the Gators to show this defense is not the defense that they've put on the field for the last few seasons, and that this defense is something else. And of course, if you're solid tackling, you're stopping the run and you're harassing Cam Ward. Now, again, got to worry about Restrepo, got to worry about their other receivers. But if you stop that run game, it's going to be a lot easier to do that. I do have some faith in our, at least, talent on that back end. Whether with the new pieces, they're working their best at the, whether they're working their best in cohesion that first game, we will see. And with that said, let's talk about some intangibles. The biggest and greatest intangible is the swamp. I mean, whether it was 2021 Alabama, 2019 Auburn, I heard someone talking about, Tennessee last year, 2023, it makes a difference in games. Yes, sometimes we lose, and it's hilarious when I hear people bring up, well, you lost to Arkansas. We did, but I can tell you the swamp was not the swamp that day against Arkansas. Heck, I don't even think it filled up until halfway through the first quarter, and by then we were down 14-0. With that said, when we have rivals, when it's a big game, especially it's now game 1, and there's been nothing but trash talk between the Hurricanes fan base and the Gator fan base for 9 months, if not longer. You've got this going on. It's going to be personal. Fans are going to be a lot more riveted than they are for a team that just got blown out by Georgia in a noon kickoff. No, this is 3:30. People have had time to get up, get to Gainesville, tailgate, get prepared for the game. And it's something they've been thinking about for months. It's the first game of the season. Hope springs eternal. And that's where the swamp comes in. That's where, they've got in-helmet comms this year. Well, it's going to be hard to hear those comms with 90,000+ people screaming. It's going to be hard to hear the comms when everyone is going nuts, when Florida is on defense. Help out the defense if you're at the game with me. Be as loud as you can. Do whatever you can do to be loud. And definitely, this is not loud. But anyways, for those not watching, I was doing the Jeff Collins, and it'll forever be called the Jeff Collins on this podcast. But for those of you that love Jeff Collins, he is coaching, as I'm recording this, at North Carolina, from what I understand. Anyways, the swamp, the biggest, outside the field impact on this game. So I think that's going to make a difference in this game. I'm not going to say this is going to be a Florida blowout by any means. I have gone back and forth about this game. I do believe that it is a must-win game that gets thrown out around a lot. But as I've said on various podcasts, including this one, it's two third-year coaches who have had the same recruiting environment, have had the same transfer portal. They could take guys from two different ways of doing things. It's year 3. 24/7 talent composite for whatever you want to make of it gives Florida a slight edge in talent over Miami. It's a home game. The home field advantage, again, the greatest intangible. This game comes down to simply coaching. If we want to talk about talent acquisition, that's the side of coaching. If we want to talk about offense, defense, that's coaching. That's what it comes down to. It's not going to come down to did everyone wear white or wear blue to the Swamp. It's not going to come down to, this or that. It's going to come down to how'd you coach? Did you coach with a low margin of error so that at the end of the game, a kick matters? Did you coach with a high margin of error of, hey, we're going to try and score every single time. We're going to be aggressive. We're not going to play conservative and hope to run out the clock when we're up 7 and oh no, we're suddenly down, as we've seen happen with both of these coaches. I'm very excited for this game. Cannot wait to be there. Like I said, I think it's going to be close. I know some people are throwing out 42-17. Gators, I've seen that. I don't think it'll be that. I would love for it to be that. With that said, I think we're going to see some scoring. With the new clock rules, I'm not quite sure how many possessions we'll get. So for my official score, I'm going to throw out 28-24 Gators. I don't pick against Florida, and this isn't just one of those I'm not picking against Florida, but I really think that the defense does improve. I really think that they are facing a more talented team than lots of Gator fans want to give Miami credit for. However, the Swamp, I do think, makes a difference. I do think the experience of Merz in the system, 5th-year starter, and also, granted, I say 5th-year starter, but he's done that at the FBS level, where so is Cam Ward, 5th-year starting, 2 years at FCS Incarnate Word, 2 years at Washington State. Now he's coming to the loudest, most aggressive stadium he's ever been in. I know there's Miami fans that may see this and be like, he was in Autzen, and Autzen one time reached the record recording. Well, that was one small moment. Minute for minute, it's not louder than the Swamp. Be prepared. This is going to be a fun game. Gators, again, I believe are going to win 28-24. And with that said, thank you all for listening. And as always, go Gators.